today I am so happy to have one of the long-standing performer, conductor, choral manager, and scholar in the southwestern Nigeria who has been part of this journey, particularly development of art music and choral culture in contemporary Nigeria. So I am happy to welcome Dr. Tolu Owoaje. Please, can you please introduce yourself to our colleagues and friends online?
Yeah, good afternoon, good day, good morning, good evening. I know that whichever part of the world you are in, um, I'm happy to be on this program today. My name is Tolu Owoaje. From I actually I work at the Department of Music, University of Ibadan, and I also am here at the Mountain Top University currently doing a sabbatical year in this place. And well, I, like Dr. Oladele has mentioned, I also grew up in as a young choir boy in the church, precisely Christ Apostolic Church Yaba, and I've functioned in the choral environment. I studied music at Oladele University, my first and second degree there, and of course, then I moved to Ibadan, where I obtained my doctoral degree, PhD in musicology, and well, I have been teaching in the Department of Music, University of Ibadan, for some years now. And, my area of interest, of course, I did piano performance, my early part of my career, and then I have been into a lot of choral conducting. I have been the director and conductor of the University of Ibadan Choir for many years, and also currently I direct the Ibadan City Choral currently, and we do a lot of musical activities in that regard. Someone that has been very interested in church music, and my studies that I've conducted have basically been in that area. I've made a lot of inquiries, research in that aspect. And specifically, the subject of our discussion for today, Yoruba Native Airs in Christian liturgy, it's an area, it's a concept that I have interrogated very incisively and very deeply. So I'm happy to be here this afternoon to have a discussion on it and for us to rub minds on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Owoaje. Well, as explained earlier, today's focus is quite unique in the sense that we are interested in this component of Nigeria's your music history. Yeah, so today we are focusing on Yoruba Native Air. Shortly, we shall dive or move into these processes, and we are happy again. Like I said, we have an expert in the house, somebody who has worked in this culture, and not just a performer who embodied this culture, but someone who has also done an extensive work, research in these areas of Nigerian history, culture, arts, and music. So we are so happy to have him today, to discuss and take us through this process or educating us and pointing us to what areas, what is this phenomenon, what are they, why, when, how. So these are the kind of questions that we are going to check into in today's conversation. So why I would like to delay you more of or delay you also. Let's just move into the process and let's engage. Let's engage. Let's have a conversation with Dr. Tolu Owoaje. So to start with, I would like to open with a question. Perhaps you can guess. This is a common question that everyone would like to ask. And that question is, what is Yoruba Native Air? Sir, what is Yoruba Native Air? And why is it so important? Let's start from there.
Okay.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for asking that. I believe once we answer that question, then it will help us to know the concept that we are dealing with. Yoruba Native Airs in Christian, Native Airs, we have it that encapsulates the cultures of society, and also we have it as Yoruba Native Airs in Christian liturgy. However, Yoruba Native Airs, through my various studies and interrogations, I have found it to, characterize this definition that I'm going to give to it. I have defined it as a danceable musical genre in which singing according to the tonal and rhythmic inflections of Yoruba text is accompanied by the organ or a keyboard instrument and drumming in the traditional Yoruba style. So that is what we have found to a large extent to answer to the definition of Yoruba Native Airs.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. But before moving to the next question, let us dwell more on this particular definition or perhaps explanation. I'm interested in 2 points, 2 components of this particular definition. The first one is the idea of danceable, drumming, and even to go further by extension, the third point, what is this notion of native? Why is this so important? Yeah. So the first one is, what is the idea of native? The second, why the question of drumming and dancing? So let's take it one by one.
Okay, thank you. The idea regarding native, the word native, over the years had even attracted some pejorative connotations, which people try to run away from. But when I started studying this phenomenon, I discovered that, it has already acquired its name before I choose to study it. And for me to, because people are now arrogating certain negative terms to native, I shouldn't run away from still calling it what it is. But if the word native there implies something indigenous, that is indigenous to a people group, indigenous and something local to a group of people in an environment, a geographical area. Yes, to a people group. So that's the idea behind the word native. Yes, it does not have any negative connotation as people are beginning to add to the word native. Then the other one, inquiry.
The other one is why the concept between drumming and dancing. At what point?
Yes.
We have this in this conception.
Yes. We have defined it because we have found all these terminal terms to come together to characterize Yoruba Native Airs. And that issue is a danceable musical genre in which singing according to the tonal and rhythmic inflections of the Yoruba text is accompanied by the keyboard and drumming. Now, we have found that if it is going to be native airs, it has to have some element of drumming and dance, or it has to be so rhythmic such that the people, the users of this music, should be able to move rhythmically to it. They should be able to dance and do. So when you have to, when in Yoruba thinking, dancing is always as a result of drumming. You know, yes, they can drum in their mind and move and to the rhythm, even in their mind. But there's something that that is causing the movement, and usually, in most cases, it's the drumming, the kind of drums that is played to this music that that elicits the dance. So this is why, yeah.
Well, I think there's, I would love, to press further in that area, but let's keep that a question and answer time. I'm sure our friends and colleagues definitely want to have one or two questions in that area, because even the idea of drumming itself and the concept of native, as you have insightfully explained, has some underlying, derogatory, connotation in line of the empires, the colonial agenda, missionary coming into Africa, which I believe we are still going to, touch upon or discuss both directly or indirectly as we move on today. So let's move to the next question quickly. Then the next question is, now if Yoruba Native Air, according to you, is defined as a danceable music by the Yoruba natives or Yoruba people with drumming and singing. Yeah. Then the question is, what is the place of this Yoruba native airs in Nigerian church music and Nigerian church music history?
Thank you very much for that question. Now, this is a type of music. It's a genre of music that evolved. It just didn't happen.
Okay.
It's something that came over a period in time, and studying the church history, that is Yoruba church history,
Yeah.
we have found that the Yoruba churches were founded, were brought about by the European missionaries around the middle of the 18th century. 19th century. And yes, 1840 something,
Yeah.
1850 thereabout, when they started their missionary activities, Badagry, Abeokuta, Lagos, in the western part of in the west coast part of Nigeria, and they started this. They started the churches, and Christianity comes with, is done in two modes: speech and music. Now, Christianity operates speech and music all the time in the prayer, worship, or preaching sessions. Those are the modes that it operates. Now, when the early Europeans came to start these churches, they were at loss as to what they could preach through interpreters, translated the translators who were translating what they were preaching, but they were at a loss as to how to make the early converts sing. So what they did, but all they knew, because they brought this religion, and all they knew was to translate the European hymns and chants that they brought into our local languages, and then sing it with the tunes that they normally use in Europe, like these hymns and the hymn tunes. And that's what of course, a lot of scholars have studied that and have talked about that a lot. But anyway, we are going to move forward today to see
I think
more.
we have some of the more like historical background online on screen now, like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me.
So referring to the history, yeah.
Yes, historically, so they brought this kind of music which was alien to our people, to the early converts. They couldn't understand that kind of music that doesn't have any dancing in it. And what they did was that they also they make sure that the early converts did not bring their own kind of music into the church. That is, they did not allow dancing and drumming and all that. So they really abhorred that. So they didn't allow such. And they kind of singing Yoruba text to their tune was making a mockery of the sensibility in the text and the words of the song. The early converts could not understand what what they were singing, because it was being twisted, it was twisting all they could think about. So it was making things difficult for them. So there was a kind of contest within their minds that this music is just not saying things right. Even when they were being explained to that this is what it's saying, they said, no, this is not what it's supposed. We don't, the Yoruba sing the way they talk. You know, the way they talk is the way they sing. That is, the tonal inflection of speech is observed even when Yoruba sing. That is, traditionally, pre-colonial advent of colonial missionaries. Yeah. You know, the way they sing that the Yoruba. So when this kind of new way of singing came, it was difficult for them to. But they just had to rally along. They went on along for a number of years, for some decades, and but it did not sit well with them. You know, yeah, it did not sit well with them. They didn't understand it, but well, it was something that was put upon them almost by force. So they carried along, but eventually the time came when they now said, look, we cannot continue this way. This kind of music that does not represent us, or that doesn't have meaning, that's not meaningful. You know, when you are singing something like ẹ jẹ́ ká finú dídùn, ẹ jẹ́ kó lóore, àánú rẹ̀ ó wá títí, òdodo dájúdájú. You know, it doesn't really, using that tune, and it doesn't make much sense. So, you know, so they then eventually, within the, but at a point, at the turn of the century, towards the end of the 19th century into the early 20th century, there was a cultural environment where cultural nationalism was pervading the environment.
So before you go into that,
yes,
let's quickly unpack this a bit. I'm interested in the idea of the nexus or the interconnections, between speech language and the singing language within the Yoruba context. So then the question is, I think it's taking us back to the earlier position or earlier point that drumming is quite important to the Yoruba people, and singing and drumming are always, in tandem, in this particular culture. Then the question is, why? So the question is, why is it so important for the Yoruba people to make this kind of connection, or why is it singing important in the sense that why do they need to connect in this sense? Why must they connect in this sense, like what you sang now? Why is it important for them? Is this a cultural thing? Is this a social thing? Or because in other cultures of the world, or even across other regions of the world, people still make music in their own, according to their own different context. But as you have explained, in the Yoruba context, as you explained, it seems to be all encompassing. music must be done in this particular way, and it must be done with these particular characters, one, two, three, four. So the question is, are these socially constructed, or ritually, or what is this about, particularly within the pre-colonial context, pre-colonial African context? Why is it so, and why did we have it that way at the time?
Well, many scholars have interrogated this aspect, and they have found that we Africans generally make music in context. You know, we make music in context, and music plays a functional role. It's not just making music. Yes, we do make music for entertainment, but then that entertainment plays a function.
Yeah.
It plays a role. So aside from that, the issue about the drumming is about the way rhythm, which drum encapsulates. Drum represents an instrument. It's an instrument that represents that has rhythm as its principal component, as its principal role. The Africans, Yorubas in particular, believe that, they have a connection with drums in the sense that it's a soulish connection. It's a soulish connection. That is, for them, it makes them to know that they are whole, they are wholesome. It is what makes them to feel that they are alive when there's rhythm, when there is drumming, particularly in the context of music, they come alive. They know that it makes them to move. We enjoy to move and to express ourselves. So it's a soulish thing, which is like it's like built into like, so we can even say to our DNA. So to speak. Yes, it's a soulish thing. Without music, without rhythm, without drumming, the whole thing it falls flat. Yes, music falls flat. Because so it has been like that in primordial times.
Thank you so much. So what you're saying in essence is that drumming, or the rhythmic nuances, character of singing is cultural.
It's cultural
to the
yes.
Yoruba people.
It's cultural.
So when the Europeans came with Lutheran or Protestant hymn singing, it wasn't connecting. So people struggle to connect in terms of musically, socially, and whatever music does for people. So they couldn't connect. Wow. Yes. Thanks so much for that explanation. And as mentioned earlier, we are still coming back to these layers of questions to explore other ideas further. But for now, let's move forward to the next layers of this particular question, of our question. And by towards the end, we are going to open it up again so we can go back to each of them from our colleagues so we can unpack one after the other. But for now, let's move to the next one. So then the next one, we were talking about 19th century political emergence at the time, and also the concept of nationalism, cultural nationalism. I'm sure you remember the first generation of African elites, they were referred to as cultural nationalism. And they also, champion layers and forms of nationalism, a nationalist idea. So let's go back to that area right now. So the question then, who are the pioneers, and what are the artistic process through which they champion these ideas of nationalism at the time?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. The earliest player in this area, somebody that could be alluded to, that who started a kind of movement that which became like a initial reaction to the condition that the early converts found themselves. Reverend J.J. Rasonkuti. Yes, he could have been one of the people at that time, but he's the one that who has become someone that we have found to be in the forefront of that reaction. And well, we saw some cogent things that he did in his bid to preach in his crusades, that open air crusades. He started using some of the folk tunes, the traditional folk tunes that were from the culture, you know, like the one that is popularly quoted, Ikumbe Wambe, you know, which is our tradition. It's a traditional song. It's a folk song, which comes from a folk tune, or you know, Ikumbe Wambe, Ikumbe Wambe. He parodied it. He put the new set of words to it, like ètò Ọlọ́run làwa ó ṣe o, ètò Ọlọ́run làwa ó ṣe o, èṣù ń ṣe ṣá ó tẹ́ o, èṣù ń ṣe ṣá kò rí pákan sá, ètò Ọlọ́run làwa ó ṣe o. He used it in his open preaching, open air services, and then people could relate with that, you know, and the fact that they even know this tune from its original source of songs for twins, songs that they use for twins, you know, to pacify twins, you know, Kumbe Wambe. So so many songs like that were there was an interchange of texts, and the people felt more comfortable singing those things, and it was something that they could relate with. So after that, some other clergymen came after him, or some other people who are in the area of music, like T.K. Phillips, and then Reverend Olude.
I think before you yes. You know, thanks so much for this wonderful exposition. But before, let's pause a bit. Let's dwell a bit more on this idea of nationalism. The question is, I know from historical details, from studies, and what has now become public or common knowledge out there, the cultural nationalism cut across African society in the late 19th century.
Yes.
They were the first pioneers of what we call the native perspective, you know, our ways of doing things, which was the first, what was a modern form of rebellion to the missionaries, you know. But this does not only happen in Nigeria or West Africa per se. It was an African thing. For instance, in South Africa, we have the likes of John Nosbokwe and Enoch Setonga, and also in Ghana we have James Hamu. In Kenya, yes. Across Africa, we have this generation of cultural nationalism. But the interesting thing, though, for this generation was that they were all priests. They were educated by the Protestant from the missionary educational system. They were produced by this system. But it got to a point where across their society, they felt the detachment or the kind of strategic play down on their own culture by the missionaries. And without, initial meeting between themselves across Africa, this generation of scholars, generation of thinkers and politicians, and some of them are catechists, pastors, here and there. So they were in the church, and that culture emerged from the church down to the society. So this is quite interesting for me. But to come back to Nigeria, the likes of Fela Rason Kuti, Josiah Rason Kuti, Josiah, who happens to be the great grandfather of Fela Anikulapo Kuti. It became so interesting because people have written a lot about this particular Nigerian phenomenon. Can call him hero, cultural hero for that matter. But the question is, why was it so important for him to mediate? Because he was actually in a privileged position as a priest.
Yes.
These guys were they were in the privileged position. They had all they want. All the white men want from them, the white missionary, was for this particular generation to just mediate. And they, by doing that, they have everything they want from in terms of social, economic, and political standards. They have it. But the question is, why were they resisting? Why were they rebellious and decided instead of staying on their own, enjoying the missionary privilege and the white man privilege? Why were they interested in championing or speaking for their people and doing so, not just saying with the mouth or action? They were actually creating alternative cultural spheres, writing hymns in local language, performing in local language, and disrupting the Western hegemony, even within their own platform through the church. Why were they like that?
Simply put, it's education. It's education. They were the first set of people to enjoy the Western education. In this part of the world, they were exposed. They went to and they also operated within the three institutions of the colonial institutions, which was the church, the schools, and the district,
the municipal government.
the municipal government.
Yes.
They were the people. They were the officers within these institutions, and so they were enlightened. So, and they knew that they cannot. It was not just music that they were not satisfied with. It was other things, other aspects of the culture that was being impugned upon, that the Europeans the European missionary were clamping down upon.
Yeah.
So the area of marriage, in so many areas, the way we dress, what we eat, what we drink, and so many other aspects of our lives. It was across the culture of the Yoruba. And at a point, they now said, yes, let us get up and begin to protest this reality, so that we can have our own minds. We can begin to do things in our own way. They were just dissatisfied, going on from one decade to the other, doing things, satisfying the Europeans. And of course, one of them were also integrated into the church hierarchy. And the other institutions, they didn't have as much say. But by the time they began to clamor for more recognition, then they felt that they needed to take their lives in their own hands. So
one other point to that is, between the let's say late 19th century down to 1940, we had series of transformation, rebellion, and series of schisms, exactly. For particularly within the church, we have layers of emerging African churches in quotes.
That's right.
People started coming up with their own ideas, borrowing ideas from the Western idea, and creating local content, what is now local content, for themselves. And that also emerged to the extent of like 1930s, the Babalolas, the new layers of apostles that shaped what we have today. But before that, we have African church. It was a general thing until 1918. We have the Elejas, we have the Joy Dudu, now at Broad Street, Bethel Church, which was their first church. And we also have layers of these, what we call the African church people, including the apostolic forms of apostolic church. The question is, was it the action of likes of Jesse that championed this in these advanced the initial the latter development of different churches, because we were told that according to history, African church, for instance, the guys marched out on a Sunday at Christ Church Marina, yeah, or one of the African churches, and they were led by one coker. Breadfruit. They marched from Breadfruit Church, and they were led by even by the people's warden, and they went to another place and created their own church. Was this part of the dynamics of the lives of Jesse?
Yes, I think it contributed. He contributed to it. It was a movement that touched on so many things. It wasn't just about music. Music was just one of the issues that was at stake. So, but they just wanted an environment where where they could express themselves and be able to do the things in a way that they will be more comfortable, and then of course take their own life in their own hands.
Of course. Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next question. Definitely, we'll come back to this set of questions again, because I'm very sure our colleagues and friends online are also looking forward to engage you in particularly take up some of these issues with you. So let's move to the next one, which is okay. Then let's go back to let's be specific a bit in terms of music. Okay, when we talk about Yoruba native air, yeah, that's the word for today. Native air, yeah, that's the word for today. So the pioneers in the other who came like the Oludes we explained earlier, and the other composers. The question is, what really happened? Even the Yoruba native airs is not one thing. Also have different composer approach the phenomenon differently. They have different artistic, though it's a national thing, more like we need a nationalistic idea, but they still have different approach depending on their own artistic level or skill, competence. So what are the difference? What distinguishes one from the other? Was there a school of thought in this time? And who are these guys? What were they doing? What defines them in their own practice?
Okay, thank you very much. At the turn of the century, people, like I said, like T.K. Phillips, who honed his skills, who grew in the Christchurch Marina, as the organist, become one of the scholars, music scholars, that was also observing how what had come up through Reverend J.J. Rasonkuti, and they were picking up some of the ideas from there. And someone like Fela Showande, also another scholar, got who also understudied T.K. Phillips. They were looking at the trend that the music of Yoruba church music was moving. And they began to encourage other church musicians in the Yoruba church that, okay, this is the way to go. Yes, there had been schisms in the church. Some people had moved to the African church, and they were able to begin to express themselves in freer musical idioms.
Yeah.
So they saw those trends, and they understand the background, the theory behind it. That okay, these people are actually clamoring to be able to sing in a way that Yoruba, it will be so intelligible for the Yoruba people, and the people can relate and enjoy the music. So they encouraged it. Let me say it. The two of them that I mentioned, T.K. Phillips, Showande, you may not even say they are Yoruba Native Air composers per se. No. They were part of the catalysts. They did something. They encouraged the other Yoruba musicians in other churches to latch on to certain things.
How? What were those things they encouraged you to do?
Yes, they encourage them to, now that, well, for example, within the African church, they could add some drums, and then they could sing according to Yoruba tonal inflection,
Okay.
pattern, because it was found out that the problem with that lack of understanding of the European hymns, translated European hymns, was because of the meaning that it wasn't given the audience, I mean the converts or the church goers. They couldn't understand the meaning of those words. So they felt, yes, let us now begin to do music in our own way, in the way Yoruba can relate with music. Yoruba relates with music when the text and the tune is according to how we speak. Yes, how we speak. So and then also the rhythm also is also follows the pattern in which we speak. So they began to encourage that, and then for example, one of the early church people, musicians, Mojola Bebi, and then Eke Ajishafe.
Okay.
They were the people that also that they're really. For example, this song that we sing all around, and we don't even know where it came from. It came at around the early part of the 20th century. Ẹ jẹ́ ká jùmọ̀ fọpẹ́ fọlọ́run. We sing it all. Hallelujah, ògo ni fún Baba. That's what people sing now. But the original thing is Hallelujah, ògo ni fọ́lọ́run, ká fijó fìlù yìn Ọlọ́run wa, alààyè ni ó yìn ọ́ bó ti yẹ. Hallelujah, ògo ni fọ́lọ́run.
It's actually I think number 127 African Church hymn book.
Yes. That's why it was incorporated into their hymn book. Ẹ jẹ́ ká jùmọ̀ fọpẹ́ fọ́lọ́run, orin ìyìn àtọpẹ́ ló yẹ wá. Ìyanu ni ìfẹ́ rẹ̀ sí gbogbo wa, ẹ kọrin ìyìn sọ́ba olórí wa. Hallelujah, ògo ni fọ́lọ́run, ká fijó fìlù yìn. That the ìlù was outlawed by the European missionaries. But so they had to put it there. Ká fijó fìlù yìn Ọlọ́run wa.
Actually part of that protest,
yes, making it song
glaring that narrative that we must do it in this particular way. Wow.
That's the refrain of that song. Káfíjó fìlù yìn Ọlọ́run wa, alààyè. Now, I told you about the soul. That you see, they admitted the converts, but they excluded their souls by not bringing in what the converts could relate with. You applaud their music, you applaud their drums, you applaud their rhythmic. You said they cannot dance. So they were just like alààyè. That thing has a significance. Alààyè ni ó yìn ọ́ bó ti yẹ. Hallelujah, ògo ni fọ́lọ́run. They became alive when they could drum and dance.
Renegotiating their own essence.
Yes.
Artistic medium.
Through the artistic medium.
In fact, this might actually be a kind of.
That's why the song came around 1912, 1913.
It might actually be one of the decolonial method, but what we now call underground method, in the sense that it is not making clearer in the public space, but it is encoded. Yes. In a way, in a form that the colonial master will not understand. This also happened in America, of course, in the 17th century. The slaves, they started encoding message, at the Congo Square to communicate to themselves how to do it, even in this plantation. So it's an African thing, actually. That's right. And it has always been part of forms of resistance, resisting domineering power, hegemonic power, and those powers that are yet to mute their own essence. So I think I appreciate that, the way you explain that. So it's part of that ways of negotiating the self and the soul and the body. Yeah, I agree with
soul and
Wow, this
so their bodies were no longer left I mean, their souls was no longer left outside.
Yeah.
They were coming to church would just be coming and be singing songs that you cannot relate with. So they wanted something.
So central to this is also the idea of meaning making. So singing, making music, but also just beyond the aesthetics, there's a cultural component, there's a spiritual component, but the dynamics that that actually bring this together, all these different layers, is the idea of meaning, the essence. Why must they make music? It's like you said, it's to preserve the soul and also nourish their own life. But the question, you spoke about Fela Showande earlier. What was the practical steps, mediation that Fela Showande, what are the ways in which he influenced this generation? Was there any contact between him and these scholars of these local intellectuals?
Yes. T.K. Phillips was like a mentor, was actually a mentor to Fela Showande. And the church which they operated, the Christ Church Cathedral, where they operated, there was a very English kind of church, and the service and the order of service, their liturgy was, purely very European. They couldn't really change that, but they understood the trend, and they continue to and they themselves, having studied music, gone to study music, they could see better when they, and they could also see the technical things, that was the theoretical things, that is the theory, in terms of the theory of music that they were interrogating. No, they looked at the songs that Yoruba sing, and they could recognize the fact that most of a people group must have a skill that they always work with. So yes, tonal structure. So they saw that, the Yorubas always sing around the pentatonic. It's not Yorubas only that does that. I mean, of course, Chinese do that, and some of the Orientals, they do that. But also we have it as our own tonal scaling pattern here. So they saw that was useful. So they encouraged themselves and others to compose music that gravitates around the pentatonic idiom, the pentatonic scale a lot, and they were doing that. Of course, if you check the T.K. Phillips compositions, his vesicles and responses, you see that it was going around all around the pentatonic, and then eventually, when they saw that, he wrote a book, a treatise that he published in 1953, Yoruba music, and he put all his observations there for people so that it could help people to understand what Yoruba music should be and how it should be characterized. So that was TK. Then Shola Wande, who was following in his footsteps, also followed him in also preaching this pentatonism. And it is on record that it was observed that, for example, Showande approached, after having gone out, traveled abroad and coming back and forth, and being a music scholar, he understood the theoretical foundations of these things, and he also influenced some of these church musicians. That, in fact, they were, I think they were meeting and they were having conversations and how to do Yoruba, a music that would be pure, that would be Yoruba, and they began to look at it more critically, and they encouraged so many of these of the composers. For example, Showande encouraged Etiola Olude, Reverend Etiola Olude, to make sure he adds that into his music, to make sure. When Reverend started composing initially, somebody that's very gifted, right from birth, when he started composing originally, he was just he could play the organ using the notes, the European notation system and all that. And he understood, he just was somebody that was very gifted. He started composing, and he was very passionate also about that indigenization of Yoruba music. So he wanted to make sure that people compose according to Yoruba musical nuances, the sensibilities of Yoruba music. So he went on and composed. He was composing his music, but at a point in time, he came across Professor Showande, and Showande met him and said, "Look, yes, what you have done is beautiful. You are doing excellently. You are doing well. However, all this your melody gravitating around the diatonic, all the diatonic notes, should be tempered and be, moved into pentatonicism. So try to make sure that your music moves around the pentatonic. That's why you, in my opinion today, you have
sorry
purely
yes. So let's dwell a bit here. So in a more let's break it down. Yes. So what does that mean in terms of scale? This what advice of Felatuani advice in Olude, bring down your work, pentatonic to speak to the Yoruba. What does that mean in practice?
So, in practice, it's like in the diatonic scale we have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, the Western diatonic scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But the one is a pentatonic, you are talking about 5 of those do, re, mi, sol, la, just 5 of those notes. Then let all your melody gravitate around those 5 notes. So when you find people who compose in Yoruba, you discover that most of our notes usually we feel comfortable and that we like speaking when in the Yoruba tonal idiom, when you have them gravitating around the 5 tones.
Even the song you sang earlier.
It's also built on that topic. La 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 so la so re mi so do re mi do. La la do so la la do so la la do so la la do so la la so do la so re mi so do re mi do.
Yeah, that's it. So I just want to clarify that for some of our audience who are not within the circuit of musical thinking, right? We do, so they can understand in the basic term what the difference between pentatonic and penta and diatonic. Okay, so thank you so much. Again, before we progress in this direction, so the point I wanted to also expatiate further is the dynamics. We are still on the connection between Fela Showande's artistry and how Fela Showande's professionalism also speaks or influence the local ideas, which is resistance movement. So between the 1900 down to 1940s, they were shaping the ideas, the tonal centers, while they were also reshaping the church structure, creating layers of African churches that speaks to their own idea of spirituality. They were also reshaping the musical structure and even the performance contests. Yeah. So I am more interested. But Fela Showande himself was also a kind of proponent, or we can say a pioneer or Western music. For instance, many people argue that Fela Showande cannot be categorized as an African art music composer, even though we have an established thesis by Bode Omojola. So many has argued that no, Fela Showande, though he works in that area, but he's actually not in the sense of art music composer. It is those who came after him, perhaps also mentored, that actually started this movement in practice. But the question is, at the time that within 1927, 1930, 1940, that this movement, this new generation, the Oludes, the Dokpemu, they were building this they were building this new archive, this new language and all the other hymn composers across the churches. Fela Showande himself was at the peak of his re-emergence in the Western world. Those were the seasons he was writing the suits. He was writing, negotiating the symphonic templates, and he was popular to the extent that he was given a privilege by BBC to stage an independence concert, for Nigeria, So, but the question is, what is the correlation? He was championing decoloniality locally, but he was also promoting the what he was championing to decolonize locally elsewhere. So does that mean that Showande was okay? Showande is not the focus for today, but as it is now, there's an interesting connection, dynamics in terms of cultural representation here. He was interested, he was influencing those who were on the ground to do the work, while he was somewhere else doing something else at the time. Yeah. So the question is, what is this correlation like? And to the fact that it was so influential on these composers at the time, and they started working according to his directives.
Well, I would say that being a scholar, he was also trying to understand himself better, and also the environment in which he was operating. He composed these suits for the organ and all these things, being a very strong organist. However, he was just trying to encourage us to find our own voice. He was trying to encourage the indigenous organists and choir masters to have a language of their own, the voice that they can be proud of. So that, in fact, the first port of call, according to the Yoruba Native Airs, school, was to first correct that notion of singing in the church, which is unintelligible. They wanted to. That's their first drive, to correct it, to make sure that people begin to sing song that is understandable, that is intelligible, that speaks to the Yoruba tonal sensibilities. So that was their first port of call. So they went after it with all their energies.
Wow.
And of course, Showande contributed to that, to helping them to achieve this goal. Yes, to achieve that goal. Yes. And then also, I want to add that, you see, it's an intercultural environment now, in the sense that this music has been introduced to our people, and the form and the structure of that music had been used over several decades, up till that point in time. And people were already even getting used to it. So it's not easy to just jettison the entire thing, and just bring. We are moving into maybe 60 years, 70 years, 80 years of a particular tradition, that was evolving. We have already moved into about 100 years of it. By 1950, it was already 100 years. So people were already getting used to it, and people have settled into it. Some of the people who were born around that period didn't even know that there's a particular way, that there's a way that the Yorubas sing, which is traditional to them, which is very, very peculiar to the Yoruba. They never know. The generation had been born that don't even know that Jesu Afepade doesn't make sense anymore. They were born into it. They just were born and they started going. You are born into the church and they start singing Jesus Afepade, no, which And somebody like Ayorinde came and said, "Jesu wa fẹ́ pàdé o lọ́jọ́ rẹ̀ tàjọ mímọ́." You know,
So beautiful.
he corrected that. You know, Dr. Moon corrected, "Wá bá mi gbé alẹ́ fẹ́rẹ́ lẹ́tàn òkùnkùn ṣú Olúwa bá mi gbé." He corrected to, "Wá bá mi gbé alẹ́ fẹ́rẹ́ lẹ́tàn òkùnkùn ṣú Olúwa bá mi gbé bí olùrànlọ́wọ́ mìíràn bá yẹ ìrànwọ́ aláìní wá bá mi gbé." You know, and they wrote other verses to it, and it was beautiful. They would put drums, soft drum into it, and people could, sway and enjoy it. You know, instead of "Wá bá mi gbé," come and decompose with me. Gbé. When you say something gbé, means to decompose. That's to the earlier converts. What does that mean? Doesn't make much sense. But when this intelligentsia, this church intelligentsia came, they now began to compose, and correct that phenomenon. They did a lot in that.
Thank you so much. This is quite important because now there's another layer to this, which we can, of course, come back to later, which is how they perform this particular culture. Because there's drum, and according to history, some of them played organs, particularly the pedal, what we call the harmonium organ. So they play this particular organ, yet with local drums. Then I can imagine, of course, I was opportune to experience this growing up also. But the question is, I'm now imagining the kind of timbre, the kind of aesthetics that they were negotiating, where they have the local, that organ sound, and also they have a particular way of playing this particular composition that actually conferred on it the uniqueness of the being Yoruba or African aesthetics. Do you have anything to say about that, or what?
Yes,
what do you think?
yes, I do. Thank you. You see, this group of people that were advocating this Yoruba Native Airs, who are working assiduously in it, they had already been, they have operated within the church. And many of them, of course, choir masters, organists, they learned to play the European hymns using the notation, the staff notation, and they understood how the harmonies sounded. They have played practically. I mean, when you are playing from hymn books that are about 700 hymn books that have 700 hymns, another one with 1,000 hymns, another one with 800, another one with 600 hymns, and they play around these hymns week in, week out. There's a way they have assimilated the melodies and the harmonies of that music. They had assimilated it. So when it was time for them to now, yes, they wanted to do something of their own. They now had they have the capacity to also express themselves. Knowing these harmonies that they've always played all these European hymns within in the context of which they have played the European hymns. So they began to use the capacity that they have imbibed in playing those hymns. They now began to, put it, express themselves using playing the Yoruba hymns. I mean, the Yoruba compositions as well. The Yoruba Native Airs. But however, there is a language. There is a language. There's a tonal, melodic language of the Native Airs, and also there is a harmonic language of it. Which, if you have not been exposed, if you are not been with the practitioners, these people who enunciated it, you may not know the nuances of that language. Yes, there's a harmonic and tonal language.
I hope we still have this, in contemporary. Perhaps let's keep that to the next phase before we open the floor for exchange and questions and conversation with our colleagues. So then the question is, advancing from your point on language, established pattern, aesthetics, timbre, and also approaches, then my question would be, in what is the place of this Yoruba or this language of Yoruba Native Air in contemporary Nigerian music? How is this culture being preserved? Are people still thinking in this line? Are people still writing in this form? Or are people still promoting it both directly or indirectly? And if they are doing so, in what ways? Do we still have culture among us? Can we still manage or preserve it? Perhaps preserve might not be the right word, but is it still around us?
Yes, it's still around us. You know, I said from the onset that the way the Yorubas speak, that they sing traditionally from onset, before the advent of Europeans and the churches.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, they have brought this the European tonal language to add to, to introduce to our geographical space, to our people. But the fact remains that they have practically infected us.
How?
Yes. That language that they brought has become something that we are now struggling with. Though a lot of people don't understand that we are struggling with it. They don't know, because they don't even know that Yorubas sing the way they speak. People don't even know that anymore, because people are born into a culture where a little level has leveled the whole lump.
So
scripture says.
So the imported culture has been the normative one, has been normalized. That we don't even know that there was the real us before that one.
Yes, that's right.
Wow.
So we have been dealing with that, and then you discover, you see, through the two institutions, colonial institutions, the school and the church. People always talk about the church, but it's the school too was there. They were teaching songs in exactly the same way, that all our songs too were, we were affected, to the extent that in recent times you'll be seeing people be calling songs like, I think I wrote some examples down somewhere. We'll be calling certain songs like ọmọ tó mọ̀ ya rẹ lójú ó ṣí ó tọmọ náà pa. They'll be calling that folk song. That is nonsense, absolute nonsense. That's not folk song. That's part of songs. The infection that we got from these hymn problems. Ọmọ tó mọ̀ ya rẹ lójú ó ṣí ó tọmọ náà. That's not our folk song. Ìyá lolùtọ́jú mi tí ń tọ́jú mi ní kékeré, ẹ̀yìn rẹ̀ ló fi tán mi, ìyá kú iṣẹ́ mi. No, that's not. These are songs that grew out of the schools. The schools are, because they were singing hymns, these same hymns that was our tonal sensibilities was being altered. They were singing them in the schools and in the church, between school and the church. Before you knew it, we started composing like them. And then you will come and be telling me that, there are so many examples I can give. I don't want to,
Wow.
Look at what we are doing today. You'll be singing, Gbogbo ayé gbé Jésù ga, Áńgẹ́lì ẹ wólẹ̀ fún, ẹ mú adé ọba rẹ̀ wá ṣe lọ́ba àwọn ọba. What's that? Yes, we do sing the European ones that, Gbogbo ayé gbé Jésù ga, Áńgẹ́lì. You know that is the European hymn.
Yes.
Or Gbogbo ayé gbé Jésù ga, Áńgẹ́lì wólẹ̀ fún, That is, yes, we know we are singing with European tune. But when you now compose, people now compose, Gbogbo ayé gbé Jésù ga, Áńgẹ́lì ẹ wólẹ̀ fún. Ẹ̀mú adé ọba rẹwà ṣe lọ́ba àwọn ọba. You know, I'm just telling you that we have been affected.
Wow, interesting. Then
or adulterated.
There's an interesting
Our mind, tonal sensibility has been adulterated.
There's an interesting connection here. Then. The kind of dynamics that the Gege Rason Kuti were negotiating, it means that business is unfinished.
Yes.
That business is not finished yet. In fact, people still need to carry on with that kind of decolonial process in terms of compositional ideas, in terms of writing lyrics, in terms of talking about music composition. Because if, like what we are doing today, these were the issues that these early composers were also reacting to, like 100, 150 years ago. Because, this is not standing Yoruba, and they were creating alternative compositional format and structure to negotiate the Yoruba sense making and meaning making. But today, 2024, January, we have a lot of these westernized centric African melodies here and there, people disguising as Africans. Then how do composers, what does composer do? What is the role of scholars in mediating this?
Very good, thank you. In fact, that's why we're having this conversation. You see, we want to build the awareness for us to understand that, yes, this, yes, we have been, this is the way we think, but we have to now begin to shift to know the right thing to do it. I get always very, a bit uncomfortable when at the end of the year, when I hear this song, what are you saying? Ọdún lọ sópin o bàbá rere. You can see some of them follows this
Western.
Then when you say ohun tó pani lẹ́kùn o lọ́dún tuntun, do you want it to happen to you or you don't want it to happen? Má jẹ́ kó ṣẹlẹ̀ sí o. That's what's supposed to be. Má jẹ́ kó ṣẹlẹ̀ sí mi o bàbá rere. Now we say má jẹ́. You want it to happen? We have to understand this whole situation, and begin to think. What we are doing here is just to bring the awareness. Whenever you bend, the way we bend our tones in Yoruba, it matters. Or else you are saying something else. And we are, but you see, in their mind, the mind has corrected it. The mind has actually, bent it to that it shouldn't happen to us. That's what you are saying. But in the real Yoruba, you are saying it should happen to you.
I think at this level, I need to thank our esteemed guest today, presenter and researcher and scholar. Thank you so much, Dr. Tolu Owoaje. We are definitely we are coming back to, there's a lot to unpack, but because of our time today, and also our friends and colleagues online are waiting to also participate, to engage further. So, and I wouldn't want to deny them of that reality. We are here because of them, and we want to engage with them. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. This is so insightful and deep. We are still going to have a second leg to this one, but let's engage with our colleagues online. Dear friends, the platform is open now. Again, this is our Organ House concert and seminar series. And today's presentation is from a particular an ongoing project of the Organ House, which is the Organ House Documentation and Digitization Project, which aim to document 100 years of church music in Nigeria. So